Hi everyone. Welcome back to the channel. We haven't done one of these in a while. I've got Joe Hungerman and Jason Hostens, Cancelled COO, on for today's episode. We want to talk about a special subject today. So, the uncomfortable truth. A lot of improvement initiatives don't fail because the methodology is bad. Most fail because leadership is really disconnected from reality to lead change effectively. They don't get trained or developed, but yet it is expected to lead a change that they don't understand on top of their normal day job. I think that's a big deal these days. Our guest today spent 20 years in supply chain and operations across manufacturing and healthcare, and he has a blunt take on Lean Six Sigma, and what he calls improvement theater, which I think is a great word or great sentence. If you've ever sat through a transformation initiative, and a lot of us have, and thought this is never going to work, this conversation's for you. Okay, so welcome back to the show. On today's episode, I'm joined by my fellow host, Jason Hostens. Jason, you want to give us a quick rundown of, a little introduction about yourself?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Jason Hostens. I'm Cancelled COO, as Riaan said. I have a background in healthcare services and continuous improvement. I've been doing that for about 20 years, and I'm really excited to be here and be part of this conversation.
Cool, man. So this one I've been looking forward to because we're diving into a topic that a lot of people think about privately, but they don't really express it loudly. Hey, Joe. So our guest today, Joe Hungerman, founder and CEO of CI. It's improvement software. They partner up with us, and we've been working together for about a year now. Joe, do you want to take a couple of minutes and just introduce yourself and your company and what it is that you do?
Yeah, of course, Riaan. Thank you. And Jason. CI came from essentially my experience. As you mentioned, I spent, about 20 years in supply chain across healthcare and manufacturing and a few other different factions. And when I was reflecting back on my time after I pivoted into technology, I was really looking at kind of what I struggled with. And I've always been an improvement-minded person. It's been something that I've been really passionate about before I even knew, what Lean was or what Toyota production system was or anything like that. It's just always been my thing. I've always looked for new and exciting ways to do things, and I think that's why I kind of fit in tech now. It's always trying to push the boundaries. So CI came out of my experience as improvement and trying to get things off and running and tracking everything and making sure that improvement doesn't just happen, that it sticks, which is one of the biggest problems that faces a lot of companies. Is you have all these programs, you spend a ton of money, all these people work extra hours and overtime to, move the needle on what the costs are and what the efficiencies are within a system, and it just doesn't formulate into something that's sustainable. And it's just something that a lot of people struggle with, and consultants, I'm sure, just bang their head against the wall, even though it keeps bringing you back repeat customers.
Mate, I can tell you now that's definitely the truth. I mean, you'll be amazed with how many places we've walked in, and you can see that they've tried again. I mean, I've worked at places where I dug up files from 2008, and it's all around 5S and VPM and focused improvement and everything else. And then you sit there and you wonder, why am I doing this again if we've already done this? It's an interesting part of it. It's an interesting scenario, specifically when people come up to us at conventions and stuff like that, and they just go plainly, look, Lean Six Sigma and improvement, continuous improvement and stuff does not work. It's like, okay, well, then you're obviously not doing it correctly. That's usually my go-to phrase. And a lot of people don't like you saying that, Jason?
It's true. And, it's really funny to have Joe talk about this, because just like you, Riaan, I've seen this happen even in healthcare, which is an industry that's supposed to be innovating. I see it happening over and over again.
Yeah, it's for me, it's like it's an interesting part. Where let's take it. For example, someone enters an organization as an operator. I mean, let's talk about manufacturing. Yeah, he's a great operator. He does that work. He learns the plant, whatever the organization, and then he gets spotted. By his manager, and then the next thing they obviously push him forward and they promote him to supervisor, and all of a sudden, things change a little bit, because now I don't have to go and open and close valves. I now have to lead people. And one of the biggest things we found is that people don't get set up for success. They don't get trained, they don't get developed, they don't get some of the bigger companies, the best companies that I've worked with, have got a leadership development program or executive development program. But still, some of that is not enough, especially when you start talking about Lean and Six Sigma. So, Joe, in your experience, I mean, coming from manufacturing and IT and, all of those places, what's been your experience with, the changing, the changing of the guard, if you want to say it like that, the implementation of Lean and Six Sigma and improvement?
In my experience, it typically comes off as more performative than really a dedication to it. It's more leadership wants to have a tagline on their, annual report, or they want to make the shareholders happy, or they want to make it look like they're actually doing something. But in reality, they don't completely buy into it. And that kind of will lead us eventually into the discussion of improvement theater, because that's really what it is. It's just, everything for show. But when push comes to shove and the belt tightens because the economy goes down, well, continuous improvement is often, at the top of the chopping block, even though it's probably the most necessary for what needs to be done, because we fall back onto those old things that, General Motors was so kind and Sloan was so kind to put in place for, activity-based costing and all this other nonsense that drives metrics that don't matter.
So I like the fact that you call it improvement theater, mate. I mean, that's probably the first time I've heard that. But I'd like us to focus on that, on that topic, because I do believe, with a lot of the experiences that I've had, and I'm sure Jason has had too, a lot of it is show and tell. A lot of it is, look, this is what we're doing. I mean, I worked with a company in Singapore. They were part of a bigger, conglomerate, and they used the site as like the showcase of what we can do with Lean. But the more we did an audit on the place, the more it was, no, this area is not in scope. This area is not in scope. This area is not in scope. But manufacturing or the warehousing, that's in scope. That's what we're going to improve. So what's your thoughts on the whole improvement theater, concept?
Improvement theater, like any theater, takes a big cast, right? And we're going to talk a lot about leadership, and that's great. But there's other players in this as well, and middle management is a problem. Consultants, no offense, are part of the problem.
Hey, mate,
because
I'm with you on that one.
I mean, there is an economic benefit for a consultant to work with a company and then them not sustain the improvement, because it just keeps a customer in their books.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I've always taken the approach that my job is to work myself out of a job. That's the true improvement mindset. Or, out of my current job into something different where it's more suitable for the company. But we have all these silos everywhere, and, we have leaders of different departments and divisions and everything else, and they have competing priorities. And, the leadership doesn't talk to each other, and then you can't ever get anything done. So unless it's top down, you're never going to get what you need to have done. So if the CEO is out there and he doesn't really believe in it, and he's just talking about all this stuff, but he's not holding his team accountable for executing it and working together, then it's just, like I said, performative, and it's just theater. It's not really actionable.
Oh yeah, and like theater, everyone's got a role to play. Yeah, I mean, I've been in situations where sitting with a plant manager, the production manager in an office, talking to the big boys on the board, and telling them everything's good, and then they mute the phone and they have a good chuckle behind the scenes. It's like, and that's the kind of stuff that really gets to me as a consultant or as a lean improvement person, or continuous improvement person, because that's like, you can't do anything without these people. You come in as a consultant, you've got a little bit of pull. It's worse when you're internal and you're a lean, person inside, because you've got absolutely no power. You work through people and you have to convince them that this is the way to go. Jason, have you got any examples of stuff like that that's happened?
Oh yeah, I've worked. You and I have talked about this before. In what happened. Like one example I can share is, I remember taking a team's data, doing some analysis, showing them where their gaps were, showing them where the opportunities were, and making recommendations on where areas they might want to focus on. I presented all of that information to the senior leader over this book of business, and what he told me was, "Your data's wrong."
Oh yeah,
nice. I'm like, "You're using your data," and that just, to me, that felt like a deflection tactic. But it's just, you guys are talking about leadership accountability, and I'm nodding my head, because I feel this. Anytime I'm going into any sort of process improvement engagement, this is something I preach. Leadership accountability has to be there, or we're not going to be successful. It has to be there from all the way from the top all the way to the middle management. Otherwise, if the leadership isn't walking in lockstep, it's going to fail.
If I can just comment on that, because it kind of segues into something I love talking about, even though it's a little bit off book for what we were planning on talking about here. And that's just organizational culture in general. I mean, that's the root cause, is poor culture. And sometimes companies get too big and they never pay attention to their culture, and then they're just at the size they can't pivot. I mean, culture is one of the hardest things to change, and if it's not deeply ingrained, like a Toyota from way back when in the founders, that stuff is going to be very difficult to ingrain into somebody. So we've been dealing with this stuff for 200 years. I mean, almost 200 years from the start of the Industrial Revolution. We had Taylorism that came in and really blamed everything on the workers and tried to make everything the workers' fault, and management just needs to crack the whip harder. I mean, it was kind of the start of continuous improvement, but it was a poor model to work with. Ford built on that, and then Toyota came out. They started really picking up speed, the mid 20th century. So their ideas have been around forever, and they've been more than willing to share it with anybody that would listen. But yet we're still dealing with all this stuff. So at that point, it becomes, how do we improve culture? And that's kind of like, CI has taken a little bit of a pivot, where we first came out and were basically, uniformly continuous improvement. In my discussions with practitioners and people out in the industry that know things, the problem was leadership buy-in, culture, change management. So with that, we brought in an excellent advisor to our advisory board, David Bovis, from England. He is the creator, and he and his partner, Levant Turk, who was a Toyota employee for many years, They created this methodology called BTFA, and it's really about kind of tying in and figuring out people don't respond to data. And this is kind of where Jason's comments triggered this thought in my head. They react to things they can emotionally invest in. So unless we as a culture in the United States say, yes, data is very important and having proof and being able to explain your position is key. But if we don't reach the people we're trying to talk to on an emotional level, then they're just not going to be receptive, because then it just comes across as a complete challenge to them, and then it just reinforces and becomes a reinforcement loop for this us versus them, leadership versus everybody else kind of mentality. And then, you know,
Come on,
LinkedIn
that
just
never
keeps getting
happens,
bigger
Joe.
and bigger.
That never happens. Come on, man. You know, you walk in there and, you know, the first thing people tell you is we're a family. You know, we work together. Everyone's happy. Look, there's dad, there's mom. You know, there's our little family. And then as soon as what you start asking questions, they all go, you know, go look at the issues and leave us alone.
Yeah.
You know, so,
I mean,
but to your point,
my
earlier,
my
you
little
know,
brother and I
we-
used to be at each other's. My little brother and I used to be at each other's throats all the time when we were growing up, but I couldn't fire him. You know,
Right.
You can't fire family.
Well, you can. I have. It's not the funnest experience, but it is what it is. But so yeah, I mean, you know, for me, it's like I completely agree with you. I think that you know, culture is the worst thing, the most difficult thing to change. And how do you change culture? You know, I've got this saying that I always give to my people is your team becomes like the leader. Yeah. It's always like that. You can have a look. I've proven it multiple times. We're working with customers at the moment where you wonder why the team is absolutely useless. You've got a financial team that think that everything's gray, when, especially in finance, it's numbers, it's black or it's white. You know, there's no in between. But the leader says, no, you know what, it doesn't really matter. We'll just put that aside. We'll get some budget from another place. It's all good, you know. And you talk to the team when you're trying to achieve something and you're working on a project, and they go, well, you know, it doesn't matter because, you know, we'll just take it from there, or we'll do this, we'll do some magic, you know, calculations. Meantime, everything still stays the same, or it gets worse for the guys actually doing the work, especially when it's projects, you know, and the project management side of things. And to your point, I mean, I was lucky enough to spend some time in Toyota and actually work with people in Japan. And their mindset is just so different. You know, they've got lifetime employment for one thing. You know, before they employ you, they do all kinds of tests or whatever, but they employ someone. And if that person isn't good at what they do, they don't just fire them or blame them or whatever. They say, okay, come in, let's look at your skills, let's find a position for you, because you know, as leadership, they've got the accountability and responsibility to put that person somewhere. You know, where they can be effective. They don't just want to chase people away. They don't just want to, you know, have attrition or, you know, people coming in and out, because they know they're investing in their people. You know, they know that they've trained this person for a year, and to get someone else in and redo that, they just keep stepping back. So, you know, that was quite interesting. And yes, for people listening, whatever, even Toyota has got defects, by the way. So, you know, everyone always craps on Toyota when there's a callback, or, hey, you know, there's a sensor or something that's not working on a car. But compared to other manufacturers out there, they are absolutely, you know, at the forefront of continuous improvement, technology. I mean, the stuff that they bring out is absolutely crazy. And that's just the stuff that we know about. So, you know, but yeah, to your point, where does culture come from? Comes from the top, mate. So, you know, that's the only thing that I can say. So I always say to people, if your improvement stuff isn't working, go look at the leaders, go look at their KPIs of just the stuff that they're supposed to be working on. Are they focused on it, and are they being held accountable? That is one of my main things in life. Jason, what are you up to over there, mate?
Well, I was thinking about this conversation that we're having about culture, and you're absolutely right. It really comes from the top, and I'm just curious, either of you, what are some red flags that you've seen where the culture's either headless or it's being directed? Because I mean, some of the things I see is like, or have said, have been like, if your culture isn't being managed by your leaders, then your people are managing your culture. And so what have been kind of your experiences in that role, in that subject?
That's not my job. That's the first one.
Oh, mate, if I had $1 for every time I've heard that, I tell you what. Or do you want me to stick a broom up my ass while I'm working so I can clean while I'm doing that? I tell you what, I wouldn't be doing this. That's for sure. I'd be on a yacht somewhere just laughing at everyone. But yeah, what's been your experience, Joe?
It's you can step into a culture and within an hour know what the culture actually is. In fact, whenever I was, looking for a new role, I always made culture the forefront of the questions I asked at the end of an interview, because I wanted to gauge their reaction, not what they actually said back to me. So if they looked uncomfortable, but the words coming out of their mouth was, "Oh yeah, we're great. We're all a big family. We all support each other." I mean, you look for red flags at the beginning. I mean, you can't.
Yeah.
I know a lot of consultants that will walk into a shop, and if they hear something from leadership that just does not fit with their own values of what they believe in, they say, "No, sorry. Here's some other consultants you might want to work with, but we're not going to work well together." So, I mean, you just have to be cognizant and just always be on the lookout for that stuff, because it's not always in your face. Sometimes it's very subtle. But the flags exist and they're persistent. I mean, 80% of the places I've worked, at least, it was noticeable within the first day of working there.
Oh, that's amazing, though. You can sometimes see it from the parking lot, mate. You drive in and you can see just the way that they take care of the place. The line markings are faded for the parking. It's these little things that I always pick up. I mean, we had I was working at a manufacturer in Australia, and we literally had an audit happen, and a guy came over from Germany. He was like helping us, with our audits and stuff, and he literally drove into the one factory, and we were all standing there waiting, like all excited about, we're going to show him what we've achieved. And he literally didn't even get out of the car. He just got the car to turn around, and they left. And we were all like, okay, well, maybe something happened or whatever. So probably about half an hour, we got a call back from him, and he said, he drove in, and same thing. He saw, the parking lot's neat and tidy. It's all clean. Everything's good. But there was a few things that were off center, like, a bin that wasn't standing in its demarcated area. A warehouse factory door that's open when you're working with fast-moving consumer goods, foods. And he literally said, look, if you can't even get that right, how are you going to get anything else right? And that's something that stuck with me to this day, because I was accountable for that. I got held accountable big time after that, because, if you can't do the small things right, that shows you how much you care about the rest of it. We thought we were great at problem solving, and look at how many projects we've done and all that kind of stuff. But for a trained eye, someone that's been doing it for a long time, which is us now, this is a few years or a long time ago, but these kind of things stick with you, because when you walk into a new customer in a place, it literally takes you a few minutes to figure out where they are. And then it's a question of, okay, well, what are we going to do about it? And are you willing to follow the rules? Because I always say to people too, we're playing a game. if there's no rules to the game, what are we going to call the game? Are we just gonna run onto the field and kick a ball? What size is the ball? What are we doing? How do I score points? So, back to your point with the leadership and with the KPIs and stuff, if we don't know the rules or we don't know what the target is, how are we playing a game? We just pitching up at work and have some time away from the wife and kids, and then we go back and we get paid. I mean, Jason, for me over here in the US, the healthcare system is a big deal, and a lot of people talk about it.
Oh yeah.
What's been your experience in this whole thing? And don't name anyone, okay?
I promise. I won't. One of the things that you see happening, especially like in healthcare services, people need more advanced care, and in some cases they have to get what's called a prior authorization. And what happens is they follow whatever rules they have for making that determination. A clinician is looking at it, a nurse is looking at it, a doctor's looking at it, and they decide it's not medically necessary. And so they're basically telling the physician who is recommending the treatment that what you're recommending is not medically necessary. And they go through this cycle of constantly resubmitting this request, providing different medical documentation, and the request for prior authorization is denied over and over again. And when I see that happening, my question is like, what is really being saved here? Because one, you're giving the member and the patient a really bad experience when they're really needing the most help, and you're spending so much money on reworking something that, if the documentation is there, it should have been approved and get the patient the care they need. So yeah, that is one thing that I see cropping up a lot right now in healthcare, is just this whole circular cycle that is happening with patients needing a prior authorization for services, and it's crazy. I mean, I see all kinds of things on social media where they're calling out the company, saying, I've done this, I've made phone calls, I've gone through this entire crazy process that you have, and I still can't get the care that I need. And then at that point, the company is finally paying attention, because then they're getting bad press about it.
That's
amazing.
Problem, right?
I mean, it's like
nothing happens until bad press comes along.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, and that's why does it take that for someone to take action? And this is my whole point. With you've got it running down from the top down. Everyone's accountable for their position. Clarify what they're responsible for. I'm very big on role clarity, and then put some service level agreements in between departments. People think that okay, the customer's always right. We got to listen to the customer, but what about internal customers? What about the customer that says, look, the doctor's given me, I need to get pre-approval for this. Here's the reason why, everything's cool. Then what about the internal customers with the processes that we run within that organization? Why aren't they talking to each other? And at the end of the day, let's face it, a business is there to make money, to make profit. But do we need to get to the point where people's health suffer because of profit? I mean, and we're not talking about just 10%. We're talking about executives getting millions upon millions of dollars bonuses because they saved the company money or something like that. So, it's really interesting, especially these days. I mean, it's really bordering on being ridiculous.
So, I studied healthcare. I have a second bachelor's degree in health service administration, and that eventually led me into healthcare. And a lot of what Jason is saying is, obviously he had boots on the ground a lot longer than I did, but what he's saying is the truth. And, we have to be 100% honest here. Our healthcare system is broken.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to turn this into a political discussion, and, it doesn't matter what side of the political ideology spectrum you fall on. The system is broken. One, because the customers for the healthcare systems have transitioned from the patient to the payer. So they have to focus more on keeping the United Healthcares and the Blue Cross Blue Shields of the world happy and make sure they're following all of that. You have compliance. The patient really falls through because, the patient is paying them. And as much as you want to believe in, there's the Hippocratic Oath and everything, and I know the nurses and the doctors are 100% committed to patient care. But it's been my experience in the near term that hospitals and healthcare systems have pivoted to focusing much more on back office and revenue cycle than they do on actual patient care, because that's where the money is.
Oh yeah.
You have to, as a hospital, you have to, account for bad accounts, and you have to account for giving necessary and required care to people that show up in your ER, even though they don't have insurance. And you have to account for all that. They're losing money on patient care, where they're trying to recapture it as back office and revenue cycle. And that completely flips the priority backwards from what it should be.
No, I agree with you. I mean, for me, having traveled a fair bit, I'm a South African. I lived, my whole life in South Africa. Then moved over to Sydney, Australia. I've lived in Mexico. I've lived in, Vancouver. All over the place. And I must say, at first I was a little bit shocked at the US. When we had to get health services here, just purely because of the cost. To get benefits and stuff. I understand, so much more now why people take a job just for the benefits. It's like, it's amazing. I know people that will literally go work at Starbucks just because they've got good benefits. So it doesn't become about the job anymore or my passion for doing something. It's about, I don't have to pay $2,500 a month for me and my family to get healthcare. And never mind healthcare, now I've got to get a separate dental care, I've got to get a separate eye care, got a separate ear care. It's like, then you got to get your medical covered. It's like, this thing is just out of control, mate. But, hopefully, we're working with, as CanSalt, we're working with the government at the moment, and we're trying to, help them become more efficient and understand their processes. And that's one of our biggest things at the moment, is trying to, help where we can. I mean, it's like, we're not part of the big four. We don't come in and become part of the furniture. Like you said earlier, we go in, we go out. You call us when you have a problem, and we come and help you, because we believe in that too. It's like, I don't believe in these guys, the big four, the money that they make out of these people. And at the end of the day, all they get, all the customer gets is a beautiful PowerPoint presentation and maybe a plan on how to fix it, and hand over the $2 million for 6 months. So, for me, it's an interesting perspective, globally, that the US is, it's a first world country. I'd never had these issues in a third world country. Why am I having it here? So, the healthcare as a whole, separate, I think, podcast for about 3 hours. So,
absolutely. Because it's the whole system. It's, from health insurance all the way through delivery of care.
It's crazy, man. It's like, okay, so I can carry on for that for a long time. So, Joe, quick question.
Can I make one more comment on that before we...
Yeah.
Can I make one more comment on that before we...
Yeah.
If you want healthcare in a nutshell, and I believe I heard this, I'm trying to cite my source, I think it was Rebecca Love on a podcast some time ago, is nurses are considered a cost center in a hospital rather than staff. So there is no benefit and there is no drive to improve the nursing staff skills. It actually behooves the hospital to cut staff. And nurses are the front line of patient care. So if you want to look at anything in healthcare that sums up how broken the system is, it's that.
And which is a shame, you know what? Because I'll finish up on this one. Because in South Africa, I spent a lot of time with the paramedics, with the nurses, with the frontline people that are first at an accident. I spent a lot of time with the police in South Africa when I was younger. It's and South Africa is could be a very dangerous place sometimes. Depends where you are, and it's like teachers over there too. Or globally actually. These guys see stuff that no person in the world should ever see. They get psychologically messed up. They get they go through a lot of trauma. But at the end of the day, they probably the professions that get paid the least out of all of these other stuff that you can go do. And I truly believe it's a calling, and then you see how, like you say, like they treat it like a cost center. It's like, okay, well, that's cool, but what are you doing with your cost center? Are you going to develop these people? Are you going to give them some support? Or are you purely looking at the financial side of things, which I think is where we go wrong a lot. It's not always about the ROI. It's not always about the money. It's about where does the money get generated from? And to your point, I think nurses, I think, in general, the frontline staff, we could really do a lot better there. I think it's, the support. If you take how many veterans are out in the streets, stuff like that, it's stuff that never should be happening. It's people that have, they're putting their lives on the line so that we can have what we have. And that's, that should be, in my opinion, like the top priority, Get that sorted out, get that, tuned in and, move forward from there. Because I think everything will follow from there. So, Jason, you got anything else to say on that?
No, I think we have chewed that one down to the bone.
Okay, cool. Because, I don't want to... Look, the whole idea is just to speak frankly. I mean, for me, it's like, we everyday people, we can see what's happening around us. We're not stupid. We've all got degrees and stuff between us, but at the end of the day, that doesn't matter. That piece of paper opened up a lot of work, doors for me, but, it's not something that I carry with me and show to everyone. It's more a question of, the way that we think, the way that we analyze, and that logical thinking at the end of the day. So, Joe, why do frontline teams so often disengage with improvement programs? What's your thoughts?
Because they're never clued in on what the point of them is. They're never told why. They're just handed down an edict from leadership saying, thou shalt now do this forever, and they're required to work twice as hard for 3/4 of the pay. And I mean, who wouldn't be upset with that? If you're not going to be honest with your frontline workers, you can't expect them to buy in what you're selling. And I think leaders often take the approach of command and control of, well, I have this title, you have to listen to me. Well, no, I don't. And they will find ways to push back because they weren't included in on the discussion. They weren't part of the decision. They had no buy-in. I mean, you can't force things on people, especially if you're in an environment where you're always behind, your orders are running late, you can't keep customers happy, everything's expedited. It's an untenable situation, and it's too stressful for them already. And now you want to add more things to it and stuff that they're not experts in or will take time to learn. I mean, it's asinine to me.
Well, this is going to be on YouTube, so we can swear if we want to. So it's all good. Jason, what about you?
Well, asinine is swearing, man. That's a normal word.
I think Joe's absolutely right. Where things have gone really well in projects that I've done, it has always been the leadership is aligned and the people at the front line understand why we're doing it. And what I've experienced in those types of projects where you have that cultural alignment all the way up and down, the folks that you're working with at the front line, when they see what you're doing and they see the questions that you're asking them, they feel heard. They feel understood by somebody that they've been trying to get this out to their leaders for years. It goes from, oh, we've done these process improvement initiatives before and they never went anywhere, to, oh my God, where have you been? I finally feel like someone's listening to me.
I've had that a few times too, and you go, well, why haven't you told someone? And they go, I've been telling people for 6 years. I spoke to the plant manager when he came through here, like 4 years ago, the one time that I saw him, and nothing got done about it. So I stopped talking about it. And that to me is like, it's a sad reality, because you, like Joe says too, you're not involving these people, but yet you want change. And you don't ask them for, this is the voice of the customer. These guys these people are internal customers. Why aren't you asking them what they want and how they would like to proceed? And it comes back from the top. So I've seen plenty of Gemba walks, which I always train people on a Gemba walk, because it turns into a management shit walk. It's like, we're going to walk in, we're going to show you where all your problems are, you better fix it, otherwise you get fired. And they walk away. Nothing ever happens. The area gets cleaned up, and 2 weeks later it looks the same, because the guys have the work to do, and no one ever follows up on it. So I agree with you, mate. I think it's there's a lot of emotional baggage and stuff that comes along with this stuff, which in turn comes back to the culture.
Yes.
And you mentioned something key there, and that's firing. And I think this sometimes gets glossed over when we have these discussions, that in a lot of cases, leaders that try to implement continuous improvement, they equate continuous improvement to headcount. And the whole goal is to cut headcount. And that's not the right approach. I'm a full believer in respect for people, or respect for humanity, what Toyota has preached for years. And we have that as a core value for CI. It's just these leaders, you see it with AI now, and it's now affecting middle management, that, we want you to do this to help make everything more efficient. And then as soon as AI gets good enough to the point where they can, do the billing or do customer service, okay, thanks, we don't need you anymore. And it's just the same story repeats itself over and over.
Well, you touched on an interesting point. We're getting towards the end of this, but AI, we've had a few customers now, the AI we're dealing with is still in infant stage. The stuff the government and all the clandestine organizations are dealing with is top shelf. That's like 5 or 6 years ahead of us. But we've had customers now get rid of entire departments and implement AI and go, okay, well, we're going to use AI, whatever. And then all of a sudden they discover that it doesn't work. And we go, well, why? It's because your data sucks. Like, your data is out of control. Your AI is working off that data, and you're wondering why it doesn't work. So we've got a customer right now that's actually hiring back the employees at double what they used to pay them to come back, fix the processes, and then they're going to implement AI again. How successful do you think that's going to be?
Yeah, AI is not at a place where it's anywhere near being sentient. So, like you said, it's garbage in, garbage out. It's the same problem that everybody's been having for years. And AI is not going to be your end-all, save-all. AI only works with what you feed it.
Exactly.
If you give it bad information, it's going to feed bad information. That's why you can see all these people complaining about hallucinations and everything else. It's trying to guess at something because you fed it a bunch of garbage.
Exactly. Jason, how many times? How many times have we encountered that, mate? Like, we've got a couple of AI systems, and we end up arguing with it, and it's like, that's not real, mate. It's like, that cannot be. It's like, oh, oops, sorry. Let me
Yeah.
try that again.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
fine.
It's a useful tool, I will say. It's a useful tool, but it still requires a lot of human interaction. It requires a lot of human judgment. And I, so far, other than kind of what Riaan was saying about, you know, the top shelf AIs that are out there, I haven't really seen AI effectively implemented anywhere. So kind of joking back to what you were talking about, you know, garbage in, garbage out, in what Riaan you were saying about the data. If your data is dirty, if your processes are out of date and not maintained, you're gonna replicate that 100 times going AI and automation.
What was the
And look,
Peter Drucker quote? It's something like, I'm paraphrasing, it's more of a sin to do something that shouldn't be done more efficiently than just not doing it at all, sort of thing.
oh yeah, I
That's
mean,
what
you know, in
AI is.
manufacturing, you're just going to produce more defects quicker, you know?
Right.
So, and I think we all understand, and for the people out there, we all understand where AI is going, what it's going to do, you know? We're all going to become artists, and we're all going to be thought leaders and not have to work, and we're going to have money in our accounts and all that kind of shit. But you know, at the end of the day, we got to talk about where we are right now. And right now, my suggestion to people out there is, you know, first of all, hire Cancel, because we can look at your data and get Joe in so we can automate your processes. But at the end of the day, you know, focus on how you treat your people, how your culture is, because the better your culture is, the more they're going to be engaged, the more they're going to want to do stuff, you know. And if you threaten people, like I've worked with a few companies do that, like, hey, if you're not on the bus, you're out. You know, it's like the bus is leaving, all that kind of crap. It's like, yes, but there's always going to be stragglers that you got to bring along. You got to treat people. Each individual needs to be treated differently. We all know that as a good leader. If you don't, just contact us. We'll have a bit of a coaching session. But I think at the end of the day, Joe, what's your final thoughts?
If we're all going to be actors, then maybe improvement theater is a good thing for us.
I like
I'm
that.
certainly not
I
going
like
to be
that.
one way. What about you, Jason? Final thoughts?
Yeah, I think really just this whole conversation just highlights how detrimental the concept of improvement theater really is. You know, it's and it embodies all of those things that we've talked about: the culture, the processes, the data, the people. In, you know, it's really about getting your culture right, getting your data right, getting your processes right, and, you know, bringing your people along.
Cool. Well, guys, I'd like to thank you for being on this episode. It's always cool talking to you guys. I mean, I love talking to Joe, Jason. You know, we always have the
Nice
most
meeting you,
interesting
Joe.
conversations. I always think that we should just be recording those things, you know, instead of making a formal thing out of it. So, look, thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for opening up. For our listeners, you know, subscribers, hit the button below. You know, like it, comment. You know, interact with the episode. We're always open for challenges. We're always open for conversations. I mean, that's one thing that, you know, I think the more people talk to each other, the more we can achieve. You know, it's when people start keeping quiet and they start, you know, keeping things to themselves is where we start, you know, losing the battle. So yeah, I mean, that's it for today. We're gonna strive to do a few more of these before the end of the year. But thank you very much, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Have a great one, guys.
Yeah.